Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another awesome follow-up for you from the brand Halios. Now a little bit about them. They were founded back in 2009 by Jason Lim out of Vancouver, Canada. They pretty much run on three principles. Number one, offer a quality, well-built watch that you can take into the water. Number two, exceed your after-sale support expectations. And number three, strive to design the next watch icon. And I think they typically hit those three on the head every time, but for me this is just another level. Guys, this is of course the Halios Fairwind, and this is in the blue. Originally I had the slate gray. This is the Bathyal blue. The slate gray was actually just a loaner slash prototype. This one is the full on, this is my personal one. This is the one that I put money down on, and it has arrived, and I wanted to report back to you guys with a full review as an owner for my actual piece versus somebody who was just kind of spending some time very casually with a loaner. Now, in terms of this type of watch, I'd consider it a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design language. You're looking for a dive watch. Of course, you're going to want water resistance. Typically, if there's some type of screw down crown, you're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelets. Now, this is their next generation diver, and it's basically built off of the success of the C4th line. And honestly, one of the cool things that I always like to share with you guys is that this thing is basically secretly Swiss made. And when I say that, it's because it meets pretty much all the technical requirements to bear the text Swiss made, but it doesn't. So although the hands movement and assembly are Swiss, you know, Jason does not get into the marketing part of Swiss made and is more so just about getting the best pieces and having, you know, the best assembly and you know, his pick of movements and whatnot. Another thing that a lot of you may not know about this is the movement that's inside is a Sellita SW200-1, but it is a no-date spec as requested per Halios, meaning there is no ghost position straight out of the factory from Sellita. So very cool, and it's not something that a lot of people actually opt to have modified. So you know, those are just little secret things. Everything else, I feel like you kind of know. It's Halios, it's highly desirable, and the thing's a knockout. So let's go ahead, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys. Whew. So this blue, definitely worth the wait. I did enjoy the gray. It was honestly growing on me, but this perfect shade of blue is exactly what I look for when I look for a blue diver. Now, these are going for $775. I'm not sure if, depending on when you're watching this, if orders have reopened back up, but essentially, typically these sell out very, very fast. The nice thing is, Jason actually set up a little bit more production, but is kind of timing things. So time release, essentially. A couple orders here, couple more assembled there through production, and I'm sure you guys know the time in the world that it is right now, with all the things that are going on. It does make things a little bit tough in terms of production for anything really, especially something that's made out of metal. So with that said, it may or may not be available again when you're watching this, but if it is, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, that's currently available now, just all right, I don't know what your reservation might be about getting this watch, but if you like the look, you'll like the watch. It's just that good. It's really great. It's again, the price $775, which is for me an absolute bargain. I could easily see this going for twice as much, if not even maybe even slightly higher than that. This has a 39mm diameter. It is only 12.4 millimeters thick. It has a 48mm lug to lug. It's made out of 316L stainless steel. It is very beautifully brushed and nicely highly polished and beveled just all over the place, guys. Ooh, look at that transition. in between brushed and polished. Look at these crisp, flat links here. Beautiful brushing. Great beveling. Just taking it to a whole nother level. Oh yeah. Yeah. Whoa. Speaking of amazing things about this watch, oh yeah, it also has this really cool quick adjust clasps where you basically press this here and oh, look at that, it extended. Push it back in. So yeah, they make it seem so easy, but this was something where, you know, they went through tons of iterations, and this is what kind of delayed the bracelet for so long, is he really wanted to get things right. And I have to say, what he settled on is just it's the total package. It's awesome. In terms of this crystal, it is a sapphire. It's double domed, and you can see here, really beautifully done on that sapphire. It also has a sapphire bezel insert, so it's also fully loomed. Another interesting quirk, it is bi-directional, because you can also get this in a 12-hour traveler's bezel. This is the diver's bezel, but it does have bi-directional. It does have clicks, 60 clicks. They are nice, pronounced, not too loose. Not too much play in between clicks, but you know, I guess that's kind of a preference thing. For me, obviously very usable for timing, but when you think of traditional diver's bezel, it is nice to have it unidirectional versus bidirectional. So that's, I guess you could say that is a, does that fall into a drawback in terms of objectively speaking, because I think subjectively, you know, you could kind of go either way. We'll see. What do you guys think? I guess for a diver, I think objectively you could say that that's a slight drawback. Better than a friction fit, because it does still have the clicks, so it's not like it's easy to you know, miss time or anything like that. I don't foresee anybody knocking this back by accident and, you know, losing minutes of air if they were to take this underwater. Now the crown is screw down and signed unguarded. Beautifully done there. You can see the way that just all the tricks here. That mid case profile is so thin, and a lot of it has to do with this beautiful undercut here. You can see it even more pronounced on the side with no crown. You see that nice undercut. You see this top bevel. It just slims everything down visually very, very nicely. You get to the case back. Very, very simple. Nothing special, guys. Nothing to write home about here. But the movement inside is pretty nice. Again, Sellita, Swiss made SW200. -1, and it is a no date spec, so there is no ghost position when you're setting the time on here, so you got to give him credit for that. It's a preference that many people voice. It's something that he addressed. So again, this is a watch from a true enthusiast. Now, in terms of the dial, you can see really beautiful blue here. It has kind of a, you know, I wouldn't call it glossy. I wouldn't call it necessarily matte though, so I'd say maybe a satin finish, somewhere in between gloss and matte there. It has a slight texture, but nothing I would consider like really matted, but really beautifully done. Applied indices, you get Swiss Superluminova C3, you get 20 atmospheres of water resistance or 200 meters, 20mm lug width, tapering, flat, brushed multi-link bracelet, fully articulated, guys, as you can see here. High polished bevels. It has a 20 down to 16mm taper, and it's using all screw-in connectors, another thing that people request. So kudos again. And then this beautiful milled clasp. My goodness, this thing gives you know, the best of them a run for their money in terms of just how glorious it is in terms of function and wear. Again, you just can press this button here and bam, you just extended your bracelet out. So you don't have to pop anything. If you want to let it breathe a little bit, you hit a little click action and just press the button down. So it's really great from that standpoint. The clasp here is also not just highly functional, it is very, very handsomely done. Look at the finishing, look at the brushing on there, the high polished bevel. It's about 18.5 millimeters, so nice and thin as well. And the toolless micro adjust is just what the doctor ordered. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this little 39 millimeter wears absolutely perfectly. It has great wrist presence. It's modern, you know, although it does have a bit of a retro vibe to it. It's far from vintage inspired. I mean, this thing is the business. Every facet, every angle, the way it holds and plays and reflects the light. And then again, you're getting this beautiful deep blue. It's actually quite vibrant as compared to the gray, which is definitely more monochromatic. So this is really going to be such a fun summer watch. Looking forward to the weather heating up over here, so I can wear this bad boy more often. But man, just the way, I mean, the crazy thing is as impressed as I am by the polished bevels, this flat brushing is immaculate. Look at how uniformly the light shimmers off of these flat links. Look at the way, follow that beveled edge from the link all the way up the side of the case. Beautifully done. Look at the end link fitment butting up to the case just beautifully, catching all the right angles. Look at the way how flat that lays. I mean, come on, guys, that is insane how well that wears. This thing is proper. This is a properly well done sports watch, amazing dive watch. And yeah, I mean, I love the design language. I think it's nice and balanced. Some of you might see this as boring. I see it as just beautifully symmetrical. My probably one, you know, I guess you could, again, nitpick could be the 12 o'clock marker not really being pronounced in any different way. So in the dark, especially since this is a no date model, you know, it in terms of really quick orientation, it would have been nice if the 12 o'clock marker either would have been double baton or had a different shape, just so we'd be able to identify it very quickly. And that's completely from just a functional dive watch perspective. But in terms of just flat out looks, I mean, it's gorgeous. I probably wouldn't change a thing about it. But in terms of, again, getting a little bit more to the functionality and the theme of a dive watch, that's something that one could say could be better. But let's go ahead, get this off the wrist. Although, man, does it enjoy being here. Look at the way it wraps. We'll go ahead and set it up for some low light transition, loom shots, and closing thoughts. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, yeah, C3, it glows. It glows very brightly. The nice thing is also you're seeing there's no bleeding on those numerals there on that bezel, which does happen, you know, in certain applications, and not the case here, which is another thing that also took a little bit of extra time in terms of production, is really getting those little things right and getting them perfect. But one thing I like to do, you know, in these low light transition, I should say in these loom shots is work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to be spending time, you know, maybe inside of a building, or maybe walking out underneath an overhang, underneath the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite vehicle. So what I like to do is show you what this will look like in transitional lighting and just generally less than optimal lighting, so you can see how these colors render, as well as how these finishes hold up in under less than optimal lighting conditions. Typically some really high contrast lighting like you're seeing here applied would expose, you know, in terms of if there were any just any imperfections or anything like that. But you can see the light is just gliding off of this bracelet really quite magically. The way it holds the light and just pops, glints and glitters. The nice thing is you can see that blue dial is a beautiful match to the tone of the bezel insert. Very nice. And you can see there's a slight shimmer in the way that it does hold the light in certain angles, because it does have a very, very ever so slight satin tone finish on there. Again, not heavily matted, not highly glossed, but somewhere in between. You can also notice that the handset accents in terms of the brushing really hold the light well, and help with legibility in lots of different situations. So, all right. Closing thoughts on the wrist, guys. Really classic proportions here, you know, and it has those really distinctly modern touches. For me, that just equate to a perfectly balanced and, you know, just a combination that creates something truly unique. The case contours taper both visual and physical weight down. So not only are you getting some of the tricks that are visually trimming the weight down, you're also getting some really deep contours and shapes that are physically milling away some of that material. So it's actually quite comfortable on the wrist. So it wears thinner, it appears thinner. In terms of model variants, of course, you have the Bathyal blue, you also have the slate gray, and then you can get it in either the sapphire diver insert or the 12-hour insert as well. And then there also are steel diver bezel inserts available as options. Now, in terms of comparable models, you know, due to the insane quality of this piece and really the lower price tag, it ends up being comparable to, I'd say, a lot more expensive watches in terms of the build quality. But then it's, you know, it's in terms of the cost, it's actually much cheaper. And it's competing against watches that are quite a few rungs down in terms of quality. So this is just like a bit of an oddball, honestly, this watch. It's in the conversation for best diver under $2,000. You know, there's some great watches that are out there. If we just say independent and micro brands, right? If we just want to go apples to apples, you know, you compare something like this to the Manta Ocean King or to the Formex Reef, and I think this holds its own. Am I saying that it's better than either of those watches? No, I'm not saying that, but it's definitely in the conversation. It's arguable to be within that kind of top three, at least from what I've seen. And I've experienced both of those other divers. I love them both. I'd like to own them all. I do own a Manta Ocean King, and yeah, it's a lovely watch. It's luxurious. This watch doesn't have quite the level of refinement, I would say, but it does make up for it in its execution of what it is trying to be. It's not necessarily trying to be quite that level of luxury, but what it is trying to be, it just nails so goddamn hard. You really can't argue with it or really consider it as a loss. So yeah, the crazy thing is it one of the best divers under $2,000? It's top three. I mean, for me anyway. But it's well under $1,000. I mean, this is a $775 watch. So you start comparing that to watches under 1,000, like you start comparing it to the Chris Wards of the world, and yeah, this is better than a Chris in so many ways. I mean, it's not as water resistant. It doesn't have, I guess, quite the toolish vibe, and maybe it's lacking a little bit of the versatility that you're going to get from a Christopher Ward. Obviously, Christopher Wards are really great. I own tons of C60s, especially the Mark IIIs. But yeah, this gives it a run for its money, and that is in terms of value per dollar, that's an insane value proposition, and they're definitely being built in much larger scale at that. I mean, for me, if this thing was twice the price at $1,550, I think it would still be very compelling. I think they might have to actually put Swiss made on the dial if that was the case. If they're charging that much, or maybe throw an SW300 in there would be amazing. But I wouldn't be mad at this watch at all for $1,550. The crazy thing is it costs half that, $775, which it just blows my mind. Bottom line here, you know, the Halios Fairwind, I think it might have, I shouldn't say it, I mean, it didn't just do it, but yeah, I think in a lot of ways it has dethroned the Christopher Ward C60 Trident as the new gold standard of what an independent micro brand can offer you for the money. Now, are there other brands out there that are giving you a lot for the money? Yeah, one of them has a very similar name. It's Halios. I've reviewed a ton of their watches on here, and they are amazing. I think with their selections that they make, for their movements, it makes them slightly less versatile and a little bit less competitive as compared to something like a Christopher Ward or a Halios. But they're also way up there. Also, Notice, they're doing great things, but honestly, I feel like Notice almost doesn't. They're not necessarily trying to be this many like times over what you need to do. They're more. I feel like they're a little bit more of a pure tool watch. This, for me, it steps up outside of that. It's just, my God, it's like a concept car of watches. It's just doing so many things it doesn't need to do. It's honestly just an inspiring piece. And yeah, I really enjoy it a lot. And it's not my most expensive watch I've ever bought. But for me, it's probably one of the ones that kind of ignites some of the higher levels of joy from within this hobby. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. This was a really long one. I consider this the full review. So thanks for sticking it out if you made it this far. If you liked the video, please do it like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.